Greetings, fellow Earthlings. If you've watched any of my music videos, you'll know that in my life, in each and every year of the rat, something musically profound would happen, or I would meet a really, really nice girl, two of which I married. Anyway, the point is, this is the year of the rat, and I don't have any new musical ideas, but what I decided to do was share a whole bunch of grammar ideas that I've carried with me for almost 30 years. So this is what we're doing. Now this is kind of a review of this series of videos. I took a dictionary. This one has just about 160,000 words in it. And I looked for the word that I thought might be the most significant, or might be the oldest, or might have the most grammatical functions, or might be the most frequently used. And I came up with the word that. That's the word I have chosen out of almost 160,000 words. Now, in this series of videos, I showed you the 5 grammatical functions, and these are the contemporary traditional terms. That's generally what they call them. I showed you that many times. Then I also showed you how I changed the terms, the names of those functions. The functions are the same, but the terms are different. All right, I talked about that many times. Then I showed how of the 5 grammatical functions of the word that, 4 of them in my system, in my mentality, are base form. They come in base form. It's just the word all by itself, and it generally almost always comes before the other significant word in the relationship. Okay? Almost always comes before. I talked about the definite article, pro-form adverb, demonstrative pronoun, and the noun clause indicator. Those are the terms I use. And I showed that there's a 5th grammatical function. This is hard to say. And I call that metaform. It functions in a metafunctional way. In other words, it goes beyond the ordinary, just a little bit beyond. It transcends. All right? And generally, in that case, the word that would come after the other significant word in the relationship, okay? And that happens, in this particular case, we'll go over this in a minute, and you would call this a relative clause. I don't. But that's the base and metaforms. Now, going back to the first function, I talked about how the word that was considered in contemporary speaking, in contemporary terms, a demonstrative adjective or a determiner, whatever. And I say no, I say it's a definite article, because we have indefinite articles, a and an. We have definite, the word the. An indefinite article designates a noun as unspecific. A definite article, as you might already know, designates a noun as specific. In other words, it limits the meaning of the noun. So you can have this phrase, a book. Okay, that's unspecific. It could be any book. You have the book. All right, a little bit more specific. The book. Right, that's more specific than a. All right, and then I say that book is the most specific. That book. It makes it perfectly clear what you're talking about. That book and no other book. So I consider the word that a definite article. All right, I talked about that. Then I also said that with the base form functions, that the word that generally comes before the other significant word in the relationship. And I showed an example. That is my car. All right? Now, in this particular case, I told you that was a cataphora. It's a word that refers forward to another word, which you could call it a postcedent referent, or you could just call it a postcedent, or you could just call it a referent. It doesn't matter. The point is, ordinarily, in a base form, okay, all right, the word that would come before the other significant word in the relationship. But I wanted to say this because there might be some viewers that are actually understanding what I'm saying and actually care about grammar. And they'll say, oh, wait a second, you might be speaking incorrectly. Well, that could be. Because here's an example, all right? That is my car. Remember the cataphora refers forward to the postcedent referent, or you could just call it postcedent or just call it referent. Now, but what about this sentence? The point is just that. Oh, now you see the word that, all right? All right, you see that pronoun becomes after the referent. So then the word that would be an anaphora, okay? It refers backwards to the antecedent referent, or you could just say antecedent or just referent. But you see, that contradicts what I said earlier. But ordinarily when little children and new students or students learning English as a second language, they will encounter this form of that in this context, in this form. See, ordinarily. So I wanted to tell you that. I was trying to make the point here that yes, even in its base form, it might sometimes come after the referent, but ordinarily the thought would be like you're saying, the point is just that. The point's just that, nothing else. But really what you're saying is, you're saying that is the point. And then here again you have your that functioning as a cataphora, referring forward to your postcedent referent. Okay, I hope that I made that clear. This is kind of like to clear up some things from the previous series because there's so much to say and I take too long. Okay, now in this series of videos also, in case you just like tuned in right in the middle and you got confused, say this guy's an idiot, I wanted to tell you that I'm only talking about the pronoun that. It's usually called a relative pronoun. I don't call it that. But I'm talking only about that, not the other relative pronouns. In this series, I'm not bothering with the other ones. I don't think they're as fun. Like who, whom, which, what, whoever, whomever, whichever, and whatever. I'm not doing that stuff. So if you're wondering why they're not around, that's not the purpose of this discussion, okay? Now, I mentioned many times that I don't refer to the relative clause as a relative clause. I don't refer to it as an adjective clause. I refer to this as either a distinction phrase or a distinction clause. I make that perfectly clear because the words, the terms, the structure that we're talking about makes it perfectly clear that it's a distinction, and I think it's a really good word to use. Now, there's other names for these. They call them defining clauses and non-defining. Well, what that means ordinarily is when they say defining, they mean restrictive, okay? Restrictive clause. I'm not going to go into detail because that's for another day, but the point is, generally for restrictive traditional relative clauses, the word that is used. In fact, the word that should be used. And if you have the so-called non-defining clause, all right, that would be a non-restrictive clause. Not really necessary to impart meaning. Not really completely necessary. So the non-defining would be sort of your non-restrictive. And in that case, you really should use the word which. People don't always abide by this rule, but it makes for sloppy, crappy writing. And if somebody literate and a good writer is reading somebody else's writing, they'll think, oh, that guy's a crappy writer. Anyway, so then when I studied relative pronouns and relative clauses, the traditional term, I decided to analyze them from 3 different perspectives. One was abstract, in other words, we go deep. What happens inside the part we can't see. I looked at the integral level, in other words, the surface level. What do we see right there on the surface in that sentence? What's plain and clear? And then I looked at the isolated level, the isolated perspective. In other words, I took a bunch of words and I thought, well, what can we pull out? How can we break it down, tear it apart, and still have it be a good sentence, okay? So I did that. And I kind of went here first. On the abstract level, I found out that I have what I call an abstract pro form. In other words, you have two separate genuine clauses. That means these are separate clauses, separate sentences that can stand alone and have meaning all by themselves. All right? They're independent. Now, if you want to talk about the plant, you say the plant died, and you also want to say the plant was a rose, but you want to say it in one genuine clause, one genuine sentence, right? What happens in the mind is it takes out the punctuation and a few words, and it replaces this with the word that. You see? The word that is replacing, it's substituting for punctuation and words. This is a beautiful thing. You say, no, Joey, your idea is screwy and you just got lucky and it only works for that sentence that you showed us. It only works for that one sentence. No, it works billions of times a day when people speak. For example, the problem is this, colon. We are quarantined. The problem is this, colon, punctuation, we are quarantined. When in mind, you don't say, oh, the problem is this, colon, we are quarantined. You say, the problem is that we are quarantined. The problem is that we are quarantined. So once again, in the mind, the word and the punctuation, all right, will be substituted by the word that. Or like, here's another example. We concluded the following, colon, all right, that's your punctuation. He lied. But you don't talk like that. I mean, sometimes we do to be silly, but you normally don't talk like that. The brain's already figured it out. It just instantly, boom, instantly. We say, we concluded that he lied. We concluded that he lied. So that's what goes on the abstract, deep level, all right? Trying to move along here. Now, regarding the so-called relative clause, which I call either a distinction phrase or a distinction clause, here's what happens. Sample, the book that is blue is damaged, all right? So, on the surface level, we're looking at the words right where they sit. We don't pull them out. We don't do crazy stuff. We just look at what you see is what you get. So we see that we have a book, a noun, sometimes called a head noun. We have that, which I explained in my videos. I call it an associator, right? And you have this little mini predicate, all right? It's a little mini predicate. It's synthetic, which means it can't stand on its own. It's not genuine. It's not the main predicate in the sentence, but it's in predicate form. So if it's in predicate form and it's synthetic or can't stand on its own, you can refer to it as a phrase. That's allowed in grammar. So what do we have here? We have book and this little tiny little predicate. And what does the word that do? On the surface or integral level, it associates these two things. It associates book is blue. The core declaration, the core association, the thing it wants to tell you is book is blue. And in that core thought, book becomes your sentence in that core thought. All right? Now there's another kind of distinction phrase or clause, which you would call a relative clause. All right? Here's a sample. The plant that he purchased was a rose. All right? On the surface level, you just take it as it is. You don't chop it up too much. You don't pull anything out. You just look at it. You say, okay, I see a noun. I see my associator, that, and I see a clause. It's not just a predicate. It's better. It has a little subject here and a little verb here, and so you actually have a clause. But it's synthetic. It can't stand by itself. It's not complete, but it's still a clause. And that lets you know that when you formulate your core declaration, your core association, okay, because that's what that is doing. That is associating. When you get that core message, what you get is, he purchased plant. Now you see, unlike up here, that plant, your head noun, is the object of that core declaration, of that thought that the sentence is trying to impart to you. You understand? Okay, moving right along. The plant that he purchased was a rose. Associator that creates an association. The word that is creating an association. This is one of the best things about my whole study on the word that, is you have an association. And I don't hear anybody talking about it anywhere on the internet. Every day there's roughly 5 billion videos on YouTube. And every day there's almost 5 billion views. That'd be like 5 billion people each clicking one video every day. And I do not see anybody anywhere in the world or in the solar system using these terms. So maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, so the association yields a core declaration, which I amended. The declaration, the main thought, like book is blue, that is a distinction. It's a distinction. It can't be any more clear. I studied this for years, and I can't refine it anymore. I can't do any better. Now, some people take the word that out. That is removed. They take it out. In my sample sentence, they would say, not the plant that he purchased. They would say, the plant he purchased was a rose. All right? They would take the word that out. And what you get, though, is you get a noun against a noun. Plant he, plant he, plant he. It's grammatically awkward and it's grammatically weird. So in your mind, I mean, when you speak, you might take the word that out, but in your mind, the word's always really there. You just don't know it, and you probably just don't care. I know, I'm going too long. I think I'll just wrap it up at this point and continue in the next video of this review, this video that goes over the key points of this series of videos, all right? So sorry it took so long, but I'm trying to make this really, really clear, because if you understand this idea, if you think it through and it clicks, you won't want to use the other terms anymore. In fact, eventually at some point, I hope people will consider these terms. All right? That's it. Thanks for being patient, and I'll see you a little bit later. Bye-bye.